Big changes are cooking in the Six Flags kitchen, literally. Chef James Major, the culinary mind behind many of Kings Island's most talked about food creations, is leaving the company. Chef Major helped transform the dining experience at Kings Island into something far beyond your typical amusement park fare. His influence could be tasted in every bite. What will the 2026 menu look like without the man who stirred the pot?
I'm Ryan, he's Don, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics, it's available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and that way you'll be able to keep up with all things Kings Island.
Hey, let's kick this off by thanking our Prestige members. I want to give a big shout out to Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Dakota Cole, Eric Rao, Dustin Jackson, Songstress Miku, Medic 302, Eastern Coaster guys and girls, Justin Y, and Mike Garrett. I want to thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers even get some free stuff. So hit that link if you want to support Tower Topics as a Tower Topics YouTube member.
Ryan, I was enjoying a meal at the Apple Barn in Pigeon Forge when I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw a post from Chef James Major that he was leaving the amusement industry and moving on to some other things. Didn't say exactly what he'd be moving on to, but it caught me by surprise. You don't expect to see people that have had such a big impact on the Kings Island, and then Cedar Fair, now Six Flags. Just a great guy, great leader. Really, inspired the people on his team to be the best they could be. It was just kind of surprising to me, that I saw that come, scrolling through on Facebook. Were you surprised?
I'm shocked. I'm really shocked and disappointed. I was disappointed when Chef Major left Kings Island for his corporate role. And it's just devastating. It really is. So what's Kings Island? Well, what's Six Flags is lost is going to be somebody else's major gain, because this guy really turned around a struggling department with a terrible reputation. And we're going to talk about that today. Chef Major's contribution to Kings Island history. You talk about somebody that's a good candidate for the Hall of Fame, by the way.
Oh, he should be a no-brainer for the Kings Island Hall of Fame. He came in, you're right. It was kind of a rudderless ship in the food department. It needed a lot of it needed someone that had that experience, that had success elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Before it was a lot of promotion, from within to these different positions, and it was just, the same thing year after year, with the food. What's the easiest thing to do? Well, chicken tenders, hamburgers, pizza. There wasn't a whole lot of creativity there. There'd be the occasional specials, but there wasn't a whole lot of creativity. And you get this guy. He was a 2-time winner of the television Food Network show Chopped. So he came in with those credentials as well. He had been an executive chef for the then called Cleveland Indians and the Cincinnati Reds. And he had always said, when he was working for those teams, if Kings Island ever opened up an executive chef position, he wanted that job. And then he ends up getting the job. Mm-hmm. And he came in around the time that the Coney Barbecue was getting ready to open. So the perfect timing. He had some great ideas, things to do on the menu, how to make the dining experience, part of the experience. When you go to the Kings Island, he wanted people, when they left the park, to be thinking about, a meal they had in the brew house or Coney Barbecue or elsewhere in the park. He wanted them to be thinking about the food, as much as they were thinking about how great those rides on the Beast was, or how great the ride on Diamondback was, so he wanted them to be thinking about that kind of thing. And he was successful in doing that, because people started for the first time since really, the early 80s, people were talking about Kings Island's food. And it went from being considered among the worst in the industry to among the best. It was always his dream to win the Golden Ticket Award for the best. That was his goal. Every year he would tell the team, we need the Golden Ticket for the, for best food. He would mention that at things like Coaster Stock. If you have a vote, make sure you, consider us for the best food. So he was always about that. He wanted, that acknowledgement, not for himself, but for his team, that you guys worked hard and this was the payoff. We won the Golden Ticket. It never happened, but people did start talking about Kings Island. People were voting for Kings Island because the food really did come around, and there was some cool things. Remember, did you ever do things like the chef's plate that he?
Certainly, yeah. Fridays at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, that was a cool thing. He was great on the things I, was involved with. Social media, he was a great partner for that. And the Kings Island blog, he was, amazing to work with on that. He would, tell me, here's what we're doing, what kind of stories can we do on this? How can we get guests excited about it? He would tell me, hey, I got something going on in the kitchen if you want to come down and get some shots for social media. He was a very good partner for what I was doing, and at that time with Kings Island social media. So nothing but great things to say about my time working with him.
Yeah. So okay, let's rewind a little bit to the history of Kings Island food, because I feel like you alluded to this in the previous episode that we just did, that a lot of people have only been visiting for like 15 years or so. But it was, if you had a season pass, it was kind of laughable to actually buy Kings Island food because it was expensive. It was, priced like it is now, except adjusted for inflation, I suppose. And there's just no way you would spend $15 or whatever on a burger and fries at Kings Island, because you'd probably get dysentery from it. Not literally, but figuratively. So,
yeah, but it was things that were, it was, sometimes your burger was cold. Sometimes it wasn't cooked all the way through. There wasn't a lot of options. You had burgers, you had pizza, you had chicken tenders, you had a chicken sandwich, so there wasn't a lot of creativity or anything with it. And I, will tell you, Ryan, I was among the literally hundreds of people that would leave the park after, getting some morning rides on the Beast and the Racer, and I would go to Wendy's or McDonald's, or, there was Frisch's down the road from the park. There was another place, I think it's Eli's is the name of it. I would go there, and I would have my lunch, or I'd have dinner, and I'd come back to the park, because number one, I wasn't going to pay the food prices because I didn't think the quality of it, warranted the price. And then you start working there, and you're eating in the employee cafeteria, and you're not really out in the park anymore. So there was like that 17-year window where I wasn't buying the food in the park, but it was in the early years. We mentioned those things. You had, and Skyline Chili came in, but I mean, you could get Skyline, La Rosa's, and then your burgers, chicken tenders, chicken sandwich, and that was about it. And for the longest time, and then Chef James Major comes in, and he pushed the envelope. This is what I want to do. I want to have this. I want to have that. I want to offer a wider menu. And there's going to be pushback to that, because there had never been anyone in that kind of a role that wanted to challenge what it had always been. That's always one of the easiest things. This is the way we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
You see that a lot. This is the way we've always done it. And people don't change. Parks don't change on how they do things sometimes. He came in and, he forced change, and it was all for the good. And guests, loved it. He was a celebrity, chef walking around the park. People
everybody knows Chef Major. Everybody can recognize that guy.
Exactly. So everybody knew who he was. He came in with those credentials. And I remember when the release went out that he was going to be the new executive chef, the TV stations picked up on it, because, you had those credentials. He was a two-time CHOP champion. You had his history with the baseball teams. the Indians and the Reds. So he was a known entity and really helped create awareness. And then all of a sudden, 2018, for the first time, when I was working at the park, you started seeing on social media, Kings Island Central, people were optimistic about the food. They were getting excited about it. And, just kind of grew from there. And it was always fun to see the things he would come up with, for the chef plate offerings, that were there on those Fridays that you mentioned. Other things he would do, when he was at Kings Island before he got promoted to that corporate role, think about what the food options were for things like Grand Carnival, what they've been since he left that role, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of funny because, Chef Major was not an island. There's a lot of because the thing, I think that the one time that people took a double take for Kings Island food was when the Reds Hall of Fame Grill opened, and that was under the direction of Chef Nate. So that was fantastic. It was as good as the food it was under Chef Major. Not scalable. It's just still, frozen burgers and hot dog, whatever. Chef Major comes in, improves everything. Everything from like, hey, let's make sure that the La Rosa's is consistent, all the way up to let's do a Sunday tailgate with a themed Bengals menu or chef's plate, or oh my God, let's not even get started on the international restaurant, the food up there. I mean, some of that stuff was just to die for. I remember eating myself sick up there just because I wanted to continue to taste the food that was in the international restaurant.
Yeah, and he always had ideas. He wanted to push for the international restaurant to be open, more often than it is. But there were other times, that the portion sizes, you would see people talking about Kings Island's portion sizes were larger than what you were getting at the other parks. Mm-hmm. And he, was very adamant that, if people are going to pay these prices, we need to give them some food. So he wanted to make sure that the portion sizes were good. The ability to inspire his team, to lead his team, to work with people individually. It wasn't just about creating the food for him. He liked working with the people too. And, the development of some of them, some have gone on to places elsewhere where they've, both in Six Flags and other places, but the new executive chef at Six Flags over Texas, one of his, young kid comes in at age 15, 16, working in food. They want to be a chef. He took them under under his wing and spent a lot of time with them, developed them. And, that guy's now, an outstanding chef in his own right. And he gets a chance to show what he can do at Six Flags over Texas now. But just, the way he led his team, that was something that always impressed me. He always, he was supportive of them. And that's important, when you're in that kind of a role, that you just don't, bark out the orders and, hand out the menus for each of the restaurant and never circle back. He was in the kitchens. He'd make his way around the park. He asked what people were doing. What can I do to help you, be better at what you're doing? What do you want to be? What are your career goals? Do you want to do this for a living? How can I help? Mm-hmm. So he was always, really good at that. And that's going to be missed, now that he's going to be leaving in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. I want to tell you, I think if I repeated this story to Chef Major, he wouldn't remember it. But this to me was what kind of put him as a placement. Like, this is how he treats people. This is how he treats the guests and so on. But it was maybe the first day of Winterfest one year. This is back when he was the executive chef at Kings Island. But they were doing the macaroni bar thing, Yeah. And I walked in and it was like because they might have opened a little bit later, or maybe I was the first one there, who knows. And he's explaining to this person, he's like, what you want to do is you want to take a big heaping scoop of the pasta and then shake it so it all spreads out, and then put the protein on the top and make sure it's even so they get it in every bite, and then make sure the cheese is layer. Like, he's explaining, like, not just like giving them instruction, and it wasn't the portion control, make sure you weigh everything. It was let's give these people something that looks good too. And it was that was so the chef coming through of like the presentation of the food is so incredibly important. But it was never like a scolding situation. He was like enthusiastically telling like, maybe put a big old scoop of this and then the protein, and then see how I spread that out. And so it was just really they were lucky to have him.
Yeah, and he was right though. I mean, that presentation, you know, how it looked on the plate when it was handed over to the guest. He knew that we lived in an age where people, especially the foodie fans, were going to take pictures.
Yeah.
And they were going to post it on social media. You know, he wanted the presentation to look really good. And, you know, it did. We would do photo shoots for food. And often they would bring in a stylist, you know, to kind of set it and how it was supposed to look. You know, he kind of took over that and, you know, elevated that too, and how the food looked for those shoots, you know. And I think some of the best photos that Kings Island has taken of food have come during the years that he's been involved at the park. You know, you go back to 2012, look at food photos. You know, look at 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. Look at those food photos, you know, just significantly better. And there's been a number of different people taking photos over the years. So it wasn't just, well, we got a better photographer. No, you had better presentation of how the food looked, and just the little touches, you know, like that. And you talked about your story and how, you know, to kind of spread it out so you get that taste in every bite. That makes a difference too, you know, when you're eating food. And just think about that. If it's not all spread out and too much is, you know, a third of it doesn't have that, you know, some of the different things on it, the different toppings or whatever it might be, this, you know, the pepper, the spices, whatever, that impacts how that meal tastes. And if it's evenly distributed, you know, it just elevates, you know, that menu option.
Yeah. And now to contrast that, this is before Chef Major, but this was when they opened the barbecue place in the water park. This story was widely circulated on KI Central and probably Facebook, but it was early days of Facebook. But the they were doing brisket, I think, and
Island Smokehouse.
The Island Smokehouse, yeah, that's the name of the place. But the person ordered the brisket, and the supervisor walked by, and he said, "That's too much. You're supposed to weigh this stuff." So the supervisor weighed it, took a piece off of it, and threw it away in front of the guest. Like, that's pretty different from Chef Major going around telling people like, well, make sure that, you know, you have a heaping spoon of this and then spread it all out and stuff. It was just like, you know, and the supervisor was probably, that was certainly a terrible decision from a guest standpoint, but they're probably, hey, we're watching portions, make sure they're weighing everything or whatever. But, you know, the chef's mentality is, you know, you put so much into it, you get so much back. And, you know, you start nickel and diming people and you're just not going to get it. But, you know, it's such a staunch difference, you know.
Yeah, and he was a big supporter of the dining plan, you know, helped in a lot of ways to expand what you're able to get on the dining plan.
Yeah.
You know, he would always, you know, before the park would open, he'd be creating the menus from the different locations around the park. He'd put a little asterisk by the ones that he wanted to be on the dining plan. You know, so he was very involved in all of that. And you would go to some other parks, and the menu wasn't as deep in terms of what you could get on the dining plan. You know, if they had some really new food, new food items or some popular food items,
or new restaurants,
you would see some parks take things off or not include them on the dining plans, or take it off because, well, too many people are getting it on the dining plan. You know, we could be selling that every day. You know, so he didn't have that mindset. He was like, hey, they bought a dining plan, you know, let's show value. Let's put more things on the plan. But he, you know, again, like I said, very, you know, supportive in that, of all different things. He would often ask, you know, hey, if there's anything that you're seeing on social media or KI Central, where someone didn't have a good meal, something was wrong with it, you know, let me know about it. And then he would use that as a positive, you know, the negative feedback, like, how can we get better? Okay, looks like we're having some, you know, this kitchen here is not performing the way it should. So let me go find out why.
Yeah.
And then that would get taken care of. You have other people sometimes that they look at that, you know, those negative comments and that, and they don't take it as a way to get better. You know, he embraced that. You know, I need that feedback. You know, I want people to keep pushing us to be better. And you don't always see that with people, especially in leadership positions. They don't want to see the negative sentiment. They just want to hear all the positive things.
Well, and I mean, it's easy to fall into the trap of anytime somebody doesn't say anything that's glowing, they're out to get the park or whatever. And he was never like that. He understood that like food's a touchy thing, and I'm sure he understood also that hungry people are at their worst too. So if you have to wait 20 minutes for your burger, you're gonna act like you were robbed at a bank or something. But if it's kind of like, why did I only get 6 tater tots with this pub burger? Like, he wanted to know about that stuff.
Oh yeah.
It epitomized whatever the antithesis of good enough is good enough. He wanted things better. He wanted to have a positive reputation. It wasn't like these people are numbers on an ID to him. And I think that they're really going to lose something by him not being part of the company anymore.
Yeah, they will. I can remember like one story, that I was in my office and he calls and he says, "I'm outside of Coney Barbecue. Bring your camera down here." He goes, I want to record something that you can put out on social media. Okay. So I come on down there, and then he's like, and he would always call himself like One Take James, because you never had to go back through and record it a second time or a third time. He didn't need a script. He just, you ask him a question, and he would be able to get it done in one take. But he was like, okay, he goes, "Get your camera rolling. All right, let's go." And then it was, "Hey, this is Chef James Major in front of, Coney Barbecue. It's our new restaurant here. It's 4th of July. Hey, this weekend, let me do the cooking for you and your family. Come on out to the park. We're going to have this, 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 and this. No need to fire up the grill at home. We'll do the cooking for you." So just little things like that he would do, it was great, and it worked. So people would see his enthusiasm, his passion for it on the social media post. It wasn't just a picture of food and then say, "Hey, come on to the park this 4th of July." It was somebody, it was a real person talking about it. The person who was closest to the work talking about it. And it really helped elevate the awareness for the food at Kings Island. And it inspired guests to make a visit. "Hey, I want to try this guy. This guy's talking about this food. It sounds amazing. Let's go try it." And then TV stations. You talk about a person that, you want to send out to the news stations for those morning shows and that to talk about what was happening in the kitchens. He was just great at that. Normally you would have to kind of like, okay, they might ask you this, they might ask you that, and you'd want to like prep the person for it. You didn't need any of that. He knew what to anticipate, what they could ask. And, and the TV stations just loved having him come into the studios.
He's well spoken. I mean, he's a true executive chef. I mean, you mentioned the photo thing too. I've actually been part of a team that did food photography, and I will tell you that the person running the show was always the chef, because the chef knew how the food was supposed to be presented. Now, lighting and angles and stuff like that, like obviously, that's a little bit more on the photography side. But as far as we want to have the cheese running down the side and stuff, like that's not a decision a photographer can make.
No. But you would have, oftentimes, the marketing director, somebody from corporate, when you're having a food shoot, they were insistent there's got to be a stylist that comes in to do this. And, he kind of put an end to that. Like, no, it doesn't have to be. It needs to be. And like you said, the chef knows what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
It needs to look like. And it just really elevated the food photography that Kings Island has had, since the time that he came in. And it continued, under, after he got his corporate position. Chef Perez is, very much involved in those. I don't know how much Chef James also got involved at that point in time, but but like I said, there's a big difference on what the food photos looked like before 2018 and what they've looked like since at the park.
I always thought it was funny that for decades, the Fest House had those food advertisements, including Skyline. And I don't know of the Fest House having Skyline. That was before Chef Major, though. All right.
He was very good, though. He was very good about, he cared about the guests. He loved your feedback. He's going to be missed.
Yeah, most certainly. So turn the mic over to you, the listener. So are you concerned with this? Do you think that the food quality is going to drop at Kings Island? Or do you think that Chef Perez is going to be up for the challenge? Leave us a comment and let us know.
All right, Ryan, we've launched an online store. If you're
Mhm.
listening and you haven't heard yet, a lot of exciting things there with the line of apparel that we have, and it's not just apparel, but there's souvenir things like mugs, caps, and everything else. And Ryan, you've got there's that Tower Topic shirt, retro font logo. I mean, it just looks really good. But talk
I
about some
can
of the other items that people can now get, Ryan. Not
Well, I
just
want to
T-shirts.
say first of all, these T-shirts. I mean, this literally, I got this out of the mailbox right before we recorded. I could not be happier with the quality of the print. It's like I don't. It's not like a sticker. That's the best way to put it. It's like it's almost like it's painted on. There's somebody that knows the phraseology, but it's a higher quality thing. But that's not all. I also have Tower Topics logo hat. I'll be wearing this to the park this weekend, so keep an eye out for it if you want to say hi. Tower Topics alternate logo hat. These are just some of the hundreds of items that are in the merchandise store.
But if you want like a coffee mug, you can get that. If you have infants, that you want to put them in a Tower Topic shirt to go to Kings Island, they're in a stroller still, but there's things, sizes for all ages. There's something for everyone. And we mean everyone, if you're a fan or not a fan of Tower Topics.
Yeah. And if you're not a fan of Tower Topics, we do have you covered. We have I Hate Tower Topics t-shirts also available. Yes, I did pay for this with my own money. I will be wearing this around because I think this will draw more attention than any other t-shirt can.
But there's times, let me put it this way too. There are times that I know Ryan says I hate Tower Topics because he's like, oh man, we got to record 3 more episodes tonight.
I will say, Don, this is kind of going off script a little bit.
No, you don't hate Tower Topics. You love it because you look.
I love Tower Topics
like I do. Yeah,
I will tell you that when we were doing Tower Topics, Attractions Group, and Pick 6, when we would hit Wednesday, I was like, I do not have the energy to do that. But
it was too much.
We put especially because I had to have one Attractions Group and Pick 6 edited that night, and it would take us till 11 o'clock to record. But
yeah, it was too much.
Too
much on your plate that I put there.
Right. Now it's Tower Topics, and then there's 3 episodes, and then we have whatever we do for the members. But I actually look forward to it now because
I do too. I mean, it's a lot of fun. You go around the park and people come up to us and they tell us how much they enjoy the podcast. You guys have no idea how much that means to us to hear that you like what we have to say, that you tune in, not once, not twice, but 3 times a week. To listen to us, just talk about random things about the park. And, we really appreciate that. So if you see us in the park, I've had people, message me, I saw you or I saw Ryan, but I didn't want to go up and bother you. You're not bothering us.
I get that every time I visit the park. I get somebody on social media saying, hey, I saw you. Like recently it was Grain and Grill. I saw you in Grain and Grill, but I didn't want to bother you. Come up and say hi.
You're not bothering us. Yeah, you're not bothering us. And we love to hear, things that, if you have ideas, topic ideas and that you'd love to hear us talk about, feel free to offer that. But no, it's always a good feeling when somebody comes up and they tell you how much they enjoy the show.
What do you do? How are you going to react when you see the first person at the park wearing a I Hate Tower Topics t-shirt? I think I'm going to... I've had too many awkward encounters where people were wearing like the old green.
You're not going to be the only one that buys that. You do know that, right?
Oh, it's funny because it's so straightforward, especially in it's just, I didn't put a logo, so it wasn't like me being cute trying to advertise. It's just words. I hate Tower Topics.
Yeah. But there's people, those that do hate Tower Topics, and we have some of our haters out there, but they hate it so much that they can't turn it off. They have to watch all 3 episodes every week too. So, we love our haters as well, as much as we love everyone else that listens to the show. I mean, everybody matters to us.
Yep. All right, let's move on to a segment we like to call Buy or Sell. Don, buy or sell. Cedar Point will remove and replace Magnum by 2032. Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell. It still runs well. Still popular. I don't see any reason why, 7 years down the road, that they would remove it unless it started to have some major problems and they needed to put a lot of money into it. But other than that, there's no reason to even think about that. I mean, it gets lost in the shuffle with some of the other newer rides, out there. People are going to talk about Siren's Curse. They're going to talk about Top Thrill 2 more than they do this ride, but it's a staple. It's a ride that really put Cedar Point on the map, and made it, what it is today. It kind of relaunched a lot of the coaster wars and stuff. So I don't see any reason, to say anything else, but I'm going to sell that.
I'm going to sell it as well. I think that even if it needs major work, they will do what needs to be done to save that ride. I think that the backlash would be absolutely incredible if they remove that ride. Too iconic, too much a part of the Cedar Point story. And usually I caveat this with, well, it's a strange time for the company, blah, blah, blah. I think that no matter what, no matter the financial situation, they will do whatever they need to do to keep that going year after year.
I agree. So, Ryan, how about some listener questions?
All right. First listener question is actually another voicemail. Let me get that pulled up for us here.
Hey, Ryan and Don. This is Alan from Northern Kentucky. Love Tower Topics. Thanks for all you do. I have a question about a Coney Island ride, Cincinnati's Coney Island, pre-Kings Island, the haunted house ride. I don't know if, Don, if you ever rode that. I was recently reading about it, and what I read was that some of the props from that haunted house dark ride at Coney Island ended up in the dark ride, The Enchanted Voyage at Kings Island when it opened. Didn't know if you knew anything about that. I'm not sure what the props were. And I don't know much about the haunted house ride at Coney Island, what kind of a ride it was, how big it was. But I'd love to learn about it if you rode it or know anything about it. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day. Bye.
I did ride that. It was an iconic attraction at Coney Island. What I remember about it is the outside facade of the building. It had like this skeleton on a ladder, and it was kind of like moving back and forth as the skeleton was trying to look into a window. So I remember the facade. It was, in a lot of ways, kind of how the vehicles and the track was. If you remember the now retired Snow White ride that was at Magic Kingdom, it was kind of like that with the vehicles. Old school, you'd go around and there'd be some doors you'd bump into, and it would open up the doors. So think also, Camden Park with their dark ride a little bit, but it was fun. I was real young at the time, but it was memorable because of the outside. And I remember, the vehicles hitting the doors and that. In terms of the props going into the Enchanted Voyage, I don't know for sure that would have happened. I don't, as I'm thinking of the Enchanted Voyage right now, I don't remember seeing anything that was recognizable from the Coney Island ride. But it was, it was amazing. It was fun. It was old school. A lot of parks back in that, that era, the 50s and 60s had dark rides like that. But it was, especially from the outside, if you can Google and try to find pictures of it, you'll see that skeleton I was talking about that was on the ladder. But that was something that very much ingrained in my memory of Coney Island was you'd walk down the Midway and see that.
And so I obviously never got to ride it, but I'm not going to say it because cancel culture.
There's the advantage of being old, Ryan, is I get to talk about Coney Island since I experienced it back.
You're not old, you're vintage.
Vintage, okay.
So the name of the ride, you can Google it. I'm not going to say it on the show. It seems like a pretty neutral word now, but at the time it was considered a racial slur. So go ahead and Google that. And the reason why I know that is because it was at the Entertainment Junction display of Coney Island. They had a sign on it that just said haunted house. And the reason why they did that is because they made the decision that, they didn't want people to think that they had come up with that, especially those who weren't familiar with Coney Island,
right?
To think that they had come up with that. But you can Google it. Like I said, it's probably a word you could get away with saying, but I'm not going to say it on the show because of the context. But yeah,
you gave me an idea for my, a future Theme Parks by Don story. I'll talk about that attraction.
That sounds like an interesting one. All right, Steve from Whereabouts Unknown said, you guys have been talking a lot lately about changes to Haunt. and the suggestion of making it more family-friendly event like Dollywood has been thrown around. My thought is this: why not best of both worlds? If Six Flags is going to charge for admission to the haunted houses, which I'm okay with, then I think they need to dump the haunt name and rebrand it into a new event. Continue and expand the Tricks and Treats event so that it is spread out throughout the entire park. Use more of the friendly fall Halloween decorations throughout the park, skeletons, jack-o'-lanterns, etc. Take all the scare actors and haunt props, and instead of spreading them thin across so many attractions, maybe have 3 houses and throw everything they have at to make this the highest quality they possibly can. Create one scare zone in the park, along with the pathway from the floral clock, or along the pathway from the floral clock to the Rivertown bathrooms that guests can access for free, but also be able to avoid if they didn't want to be scared. This would also allow the park to remain fully open for the whole family all night without having to tone down their haunted experience with Nobu necklaces and softened indoor experiences, while also creating a better quality maze experience that people will pay to access if they really want that experience. I don't think it has to be a this or that, or one or the other situation, but instead just an overall revamp of the experience.
I agree that it doesn't have to be, this or that there's a lot of different avenues that you could go to create a Halloween event. I think they would look at it on paper and they would say that, haunt's too popular to do anything like that with it. I like your ideas with it. I think that would appeal to a lot of guests if they were to do something like that. But I don't know. I mean, I think that they've got opportunity to kind of reinvent the fall, not just for Kings Island, but the entire chain. And I think that that's a possibility of that happening once they get a new CEO in place. And, some of the, especially one individual that they've added to the board, recently, comes from the hospitality industry and has their own ideas on what a guest experience is supposed to be. So I think that there will be some things that will definitely be talked about, once a new CEO is in place, about how should we do this, how should we do that. And I think one of the things they will look at is how Six Flags does Halloween across the board. And maybe something like you've suggested here, becomes, part of that, new plan, if they have a new plan, or they, go a little deeper in this direction, with the scary stuff. I don't know. But I do think that Haunt and the Halloween event, I think it's getting close to that time where they're going to look at doing something a little bit different.
I agree. Clearly, they're doing something a little different with the upcharges and so on. I think that the model that they have now kind of work. The only wish that I would have is that I do wish there was a good way to close the park and reopen it like they've attempted to do in the past, just so there's not that conflict. Because what Kings Island does is a worst case scenario. So it hits 6 o'clock and kids are leaving, and all of a sudden these concussion explosions go off. Like that's just such a bad idea. I mean, I like the fact that they had the concussion explosions, but I can see why, a 4-year-old might be horrified by something like that.
Yeah. Now their event works, Ryan, at Kings Island, like the model, because of how saturated they are in the market with season pass holders. Within like a 45-minute radius of the park, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of season pass holders. So it works to that degree. If they wanted to or needed to draw from outside the market, they wanted to have more paid tickets, there would be a different way they would need to go about the fall season, what the daytime event looks like, what the nighttime event looks like. That model would not work if you needed to rely on getting people from outside of the market. That's why I think like Cedar Point, what they do there, they're drawing from further away, more of a destination. People are staying, overnight, going a couple of days, going Friday and Saturday or Thursday and Friday. So they do it, Halloween weekends is a little bit different. Their daytime is different than what Kings Island is. So it just really depends on the market and what you can do. But I think because of the way it's currently at Kings Island, with the abundance of season pass holders that live within that 45-minute radius of the park, the model works with what they're doing right now in terms of just bringing people into the park. Now, how much revenue it generates, are they reaching potential there? A lot of those pass holders have dining plans. A lot of them have already, bought earlier in the season. They bought their all-season fast lane, those kind of things. They got the drink plan. So how much additional revenue are you really making in the fall? You're not getting the parking, you're not getting their food, you're not getting their drinks and stuff. That's been paid for months ago. So that's something that I think they're going to have to look at too, is how can we capitalize? We've got all these people in the park, all these pass holders. We draw good crowds in the fall, but how can we monetize that a little bit better? And Ryan, you brought up things many times. If you got that many people in the park and you can't figure out a way, you got the wrong people working for you. So that's something I think that they really have to look at and explore. And I think they will, as they get new people on the board and they get a new CEO. I think everything, is open for discussion.
Yeah. Now, one thing, you talk about, like, are we making any additional revenue or whatever in the fall? I think that the fall is absolutely designed to sell season passes for the following year. So I think that's where the significance lies. And that's why it hasn't fallen off or anything. But yeah. Thanks, Steve. That's an interesting question. Cam from the mean streets of Edgewood, Kentucky. Don, saw you at Dollywood. Seems like you're there more than Seems like you're there more than KI. In your opinion, do you think Kings Island could use an all-you-can-eat buffet like Dollywood has in the county fair section or Granny's?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that they could certainly use the buffet. That's a popular thing, and it adds a lot of value for guests. It's expensive, but it's worth it, with what, the quality of the food that Dollywood has. I've eaten at the county fair buffet. That's really good food. And then this past visit, it was Granny's, and, you had the fried chicken, you had the mashed potatoes and gravy,
the cornbread,
cheese, the cornbread, pot roast was another thing that, we had. So, I mean, it was really, high-end food. It was really good. I felt, even though it was expensive, my whole family, we felt that it was a great value. So, yeah, I mean, I think Kings Island could certainly use something like that. They've dabbled before with buffets. They've tried it during Winterfest, and then the fall before up in the International Restaurant, but inconsistent on what night you could do it, because of group sales and things, having, different clients and that up there. It's there's just no consistency to be able to grow that and make that something that guests think about when they come to the park. They rarely ever, would do anything in the summer months in recent years, in terms of having that open. So that would be a place to do it. So they have the building, they have the facilities to do that. But it's always one of those things that, Kings Island would stick their foot in the water with a buffet and then just not continue it, or make it something that's a priority. So I think that's something they'd have to do if they were going to do something like that. Or you build something somewhere else where you can do an all-you-can-eat buffet in the park. And maybe that's something that they would do in the years ahead, is find a spot, build a location, kind of like they did with Coney Barbecue, and just make it more of a, all-you-can-eat kind of a thing. You'd have to have something where you have if you have it in where you have a sit-down type of a thing, you have the server come up to you and keep asking what else to bring out. That's probably the best way to do it. That's what Granny's is at Dollywood.
Family
So
style.
they have this, the family style. The server comes out. Now the other one at the the county fair. Location. That one is set up to where it's just, you just go down and you just keep filling up your plate.
Oh, it is? It was family style last time I went there.
Yeah, no, that was one of those ones you can just fill up your plate. They didn't have, it's got like the picnic tables and stuff in there with, it's got the covering and stuff on it, but it's a little bit different there. And you just go and you just circle around the table and you just kind of, get what you need. They use that a lot for media events in there. They use it for private events too. So there are days that it's not open. It wasn't open, when I was recently there because of a private event. But that one has been really enjoyable too. So I think that, there's certainly opportunity there. I'd love to see Kings Island get an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got your own questions, you can email us at hosts, HOSTS, at towertopics.com. That's hosts at towertopics.com. You don't want to send an email? You can send a text or a voicemail, 513-399-7538. That's 513-399-7538. If you text us, we'll read your question just like we did these. If you leave us a voicemail, then we'll play the voicemail. And please leave your first name, the city you're from, as well as your question, comment, concern.
And now a word from our sponsor for this episode of Tower Topics.
Feel the pulse of terror at the nation's #1 rated haunt. Head to America's most visited Scream Park, Land of Illusion, the ultimate haunted destination. 6 bone-chilling attractions. All-night fun with a full bar and a food court to fuel your adventure. Will you conquer the scares? Land of Illusion. Get tickets now at landofillusion.com.
I'm Ryan, that's Don, and this is Tower Topics.